Hi, my name is Lily Holtzner, and I am a career counselor with Cal Poly Career Services. And today I am going to talk a little bit about how to ace your interview. So, just for the sake of keeping this presentation a little bit more on the short and sweet side, I am breaking up the entire interview preparation process into three parts. So this recording is going to be focusing on preparing for your interview. There is a separate recording that you can listen to on how to prepare for things that will happen during the interview. And then there's a third recording about things that you can do to make a good impression after the interview. So feel free to skip ahead or jump into whichever section that you feel is most relevant for your needs. But for the sake of this recording, I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that you should be doing before your interview so that you're ready for whatever comes your way. So, preparing for your interview. What are some of the things that you need to be doing so that you are not walking into this without an idea of what's going to happen? First up, I recommend reviewing the job description very closely. This is going to be a good indicator of obviously what the company or organization is looking for, but it's also going to potentially give you an idea of the types of questions that they might be asking you. It will also help you figure out the things that you have, on your resume in your prior experiences that you are going to want to highlight when you're heading into that interview situation. The next piece is making sure that you're taking time to research the company and the organization. Beyond the job description, you want to have a good idea about what that company is like, the current projects that they're working on, what other companies or news organizations are saying about them. All of those things are important for you to know as you're heading into an interview with a particular organization. And then the last thing is making sure that you're taking the time to practice. I know interviewing can be really nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing for a lot of reasons. It's hard to be put on the spot and be asked questions about your past experience. It can be nerve-wracking to be with people that you don't know. So I want to make sure that the first time that you're answering the types of questions that will be asked is not when you're in that interview setting when it's like a make or break situation. I want you to have time to stumble through those answers, to figure out the things that are relevant, to weed out the things that you don't need to be saying. And the only way that you can do that is by practicing beforehand. Interviews are not something that you want to wing it or procrastinate and leave it to the last minute to prepare. And with that being said, it gets easier the more that you do it. So don't worry if you don't have time to prepare as much as you would like. Every interview that you have is also going to be a learning experience, but you will ultimately be more successful and have an easier time if you are making that commitment to practicing and getting ready. So within that research piece, an important part of getting ready for your interviews is doing your homework. If you have ties to people that are working at the company or the organization, or maybe you're looking at a grad program and you're getting ready for interviews and you know a student who's already within that graduate program, taking some time to do informational interviews is going to give you a really good idea about what the company culture is like. What's the work environment look like? What are some of the projects that people are working on? Like bonus points if you can find someone that would be on the same team you would be hired into. But it's a really great way to get a behind the scenes glimpse into what it's actually like to work at a particular company or be in a particular program, is by talking with people that are already doing it. So you can look on LinkedIn as well as Cal Poly Career Connections to find folks that are potentially Cal Poly alums that are working at the company that you're looking at. That's a really great connection to utilize. But if you don't know anyone or if there aren't any Cal Poly alums at that company, you can still ask for an informational interview. And I'm going to go ahead, you'll find other resources that are linked as well that you can access about navigating LinkedIn to find alumni, accessing Cal Poly Career Connections, and then asking for informational interviews in general, as well as just some more background on what informational interviews actually are, if this is the first time that you're hearing that term. As I mentioned before, you also want to take some time to review the company website. This is really important because it allows you to get a good feel for that company. A lot of the times organizations will post their mission, their vision, their values. That can be a really good thing for you to be familiar with as you're heading into an interview situation. And it also helps you figure out if this is a company that aligns with your interests, your values, your personality. Like, do you see this as a place where you're going to feel comfortable upholding the things that they value as a company? Or are there some things that don't necessarily line up with where you're at? And not saying you have to be perfectly aligned with the company and what they do, but it's good for you to have an awareness of that, and it can help factor into your decision making as you're going through the job search process. And it also helps you tailor the types of ways that you want to prepare. For example, if you have a company and one of their values is stated really strongly on their website as being teamwork, and you were in charge of organizing like the design and implementation on the Cal Poly Rose Float, and you were in charge of a large team, or you were working in an interdisciplinary team environment, that might be something that you want to highlight in one of your answers when they're asking you questions that will probably be focused on teamwork. So looking at the things that they value can help you figure out how you can confidently express your related experiences and skills in a way that will be relevant to them. Another really cool resource that you can look at is Glassdoor.com. I believe you do have to make an account, but it is free. And sometimes you can see limited information without making an account. But you can go in, you can read company reviews, and you can also, there's a tab for interviews. So you can go in and see what prior interview questions have been for candidates that have interviewed for that company. And that can be really helpful for you because obviously they might ask those same questions again, or things that are very similar. So using that as a tool to kind of identify what might come up can be very helpful. Make sure that you are checking out, like, has this company been in the news lately? Do they have any press releases? Are they working on any exciting new projects? Bonus points if those projects are related to the position that you're applying for. Checking out their social media, seeing if they even have a social media. What are some of the things that they're posting? Is it relevant to you? Is it exciting for you? If you're reviewing things and you're finding that, wow, like this looks really cool, like bring that up, incorporate those things into your answers, show that you have done your research and that you have been intentional about why you want to be, working for this company. So you might be wondering of like, okay, like I've done all this research, I've got a good idea about what the company is about. What are some of the questions that I might encounter during an interview? So these are some more general questions. Obviously, depending on your major and your industry, you can always do, more concentrated searches for like industry specific questions. And I'll talk a little bit about Big Interview, which is something that you have access to as a Cal Poly student. I'm going to actually post a separate video on how to navigate that and find those industry specific questions. So keep an eye out for that. But these are some general questions that you can focus on. So things like, what motivated you to apply for this position? What do you consider to be your greatest strengths? What are your weaknesses? How has your education prepared you for this position? Describe a project you have completed and the steps you used to complete it. And then, why do you want to work for our organization? So hopefully you can see that by having done some of that research, a lot of these questions should be pretty easy to answer, incorporating your personal experience and perspective, as well as the research that you have done on that company or organization. Definitely something that you will need to practice a little bit. And in that vein, as you are getting ready to answer those questions, I highly recommend using the STAR method as you are coming up with answers to things like, tell me about a time when you worked in a team environment. STAR will keep you concise, it will help you provide context, and it will give you a structure to kind of have a little bit more of a formulaic response. So it's not just a rambling, like, let me tell you the whole story. STAR will help keep you concise. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So as you are answering questions for the employer, you want to make sure that you are hitting on these main points. What was the situation that you were in? What did you do to solve or address it? And what changed or improved afterwards? So take some time. I usually, when I'm applying for a job, I will sit down and I will write out a full list of like 10 reasons why I'm going to be a good fit for this particular job, and I tailor that list to that job specifically. And then from there, I go through and pull out the things that I want to highlight from that top 10 list, and I write a STAR story for each one. This is not something that you need to write like these beautiful paragraphs for. Think of it as kind of bullet points that are going to jog your memory and help you be specific with what you want to say. A good rule of thumb is to keep your answers under about 2 minutes. Like if you're going for a 5-minute answer, that'll probably just be too long. So aiming for that 2-minute max time limit of how you want to explain your answers. And this is another point too. You don't want these stories to feel super rehearsed. Don't think of this as a script that you need to read off of or memorize. Think of it more as like talking points that you can improvise off of. You're giving yourself the structure, but you're not fleshing it fully out. And that's where that practice piece becomes really, really important in making sure that you are comfortable covering the different aspects of each of those STAR stories. Again, doesn't have to be memorized, but just something that you can say it succinctly in a couple different ways and you practice to the point where it feels comfortable. And it's okay if it feels really uncomfortable the first couple of times you do it. That's why the practice is going to help you. So another question that you will most definitely get is, tell me about yourself. This is probably going to be the first question that you'll get. So this is an important one to be prepared for. And it's a hard one. It's pretty vague. Do they want to know where you were born? Do they want to know your hobbies? What do they want to know? What do you need to tell them? So things to focus on as you're navigating this question. This is not your entire life story. This is you sharing relevant things about your experience. So your education, work experience, internship experience, class projects, and then highlighting specific skills or strengths that relate directly to the role that you are interviewing for, and highlighting, again, that excitement, that enthusiasm, that research that you've done about this specific role. So this is kind of similar if you've heard of like an elevator pitch. This should not be a super long answer. This should be, again, around that 2 minutes tops, hitting on those main points. This is one that you definitely want to practice. You want it to be clean, you want it to be engaging, and you want it to be tailored to that specific position. So this is a good one if you've got your family, friends, partner, roommate, whoever, have them ask you this. Practice it until it feels natural. And again, it's okay if it seems strange the first couple of times you do it. It will get easier, I promise. Another type of question that you might encounter during an interview is called a behavioral question. So generally, these are a little bit more of like, tell me about a time when. The purpose of these questions is to help the interviewer figure out how you have acted in past experiences, because that can be a really good indicator of how you're going to react in future experiences. So these are usually along the lines of like a little bit more challenging. They might be asking you to talk about a time when you failed at something, in addition to something that you found really rewarding. So going ahead and writing out a couple different examples, and again, if you've already done kind of like the top 10 list, here's why I'm awesome, you're gonna have some good examples for like the positive experiences. But it's good to think about times when things didn't go the way that you expected them to go, or you worked in a challenging environment. Maybe you were in a group project and not everyone was pulling their weight. How did you handle that? And it's important here that you want to keep in mind that this is still in a professional setting, so you don't want to badmouth anyone when you're addressing some of these more challenging questions. Again, kind of going back to that, the STAR technique, like what was the situation, what was the task that you were given, what was the action that you took, and what was the result? And within that, you might also want to include a little bit of that reflection. So if you're talking about, tell me about a time you worked in a team environment and encountered conflict, you'll lay out the situation, and you'll want to think about like, okay, like what was my role within that situation? Maybe you were the person that decided to call a team meeting so you could all discuss how to best move forward, without directly calling out one person who wasn't doing their work. You made it a team environment. Everyone got assigned, specific things that they had to do, and the result was that the project was completed on time and everyone pulled an equal load. Things like that. You don't have to go into like, wow, this one person was really annoying and they didn't do any of the work, so we just decided to ignore them. Like, no, think about what the employer would want to hear. And make sure that you're choosing a story that highlights that. And again, that's where having that practice beforehand and having a couple of examples ready to go is really helpful. So you're not going to be kind of, on your heels trying to pivot and come up with an answer on the fly. So something to keep in mind for that. I know I mentioned prior, another part of the interview process is making sure that you are preparing some questions to ask. Here are some solid examples that will help give you a really good idea of what that job is going to look like. An important but not very well acknowledged fact about interviews is that the company is interviewing you, but you are also interviewing them. It goes both ways. So your time to ask questions is your time to figure out if this company is a place that you want to be, if it is going to give you the type of support that you need, if the culture is going to fit with you. And those questions can reflect that. So asking about the type of training that's available, what does a typical day or week look like in that position? What's really engaging about the work for the employers? Are there mentoring programs available? And obviously a good question to also ask is, what's your timeline for next steps? Because that will let you know if and when you need to follow up, when you can expect to hear back, and when you might be starting that new position if you were to accept the offer. An important thing to note is that this is not the time to ask about, paid time off, pay, benefits. Like that will come later in the conversation. And honestly, if you've done an informational interview with someone who works at that company, if that's something you were able to do, hopefully you might have already asked some of those questions. And I know it's important to know rate of pay and benefits and all of those things. But generally, you don't want to be the person asking those questions during a first round interview. that would be more of a second round interview or during a negotiation or offer process. So just something to keep in mind. And I will say that having these questions prepared, you can write them down, you can bring a list with you, or if it's a virtual interview, you can have that list right in front of you. Having good questions sets you apart as a candidate, especially if they're tailored to the specific company. And if they are genuinely things that you're interested about, that really shows. So an important thing to keep in mind. So the last part of getting ready for your interview is figuring out what to wear. I recommend always err more on the side of, professional, business professional. Better to be overdressed than underdressed, and kind of scale it back from further interviews, or, once you get the job, if everyone's wearing jeans and a t-shirt, feel free to wear jeans and a t-shirt then, but don't do that during the interview. It's up to you depending on what you feel most comfortable in, but professional top, a nice pair of slacks or dress pants, or a skirt or dress, whatever you are most comfortable in. Closed-toed shoes are generally recommended, and definitely like no jeans or anything like that. Usually, I recommend trying on your outfit beforehand, just to make sure that it feels comfortable, that you can move, that there aren't any distracting itchy tags or things pinching that are making you feel uncomfortable. If it's an in-person interview and you're going to be walking around, make sure that you are not wearing brand new shoes. Give yourself some time to break them in, otherwise you will have blisters and you will be uncomfortable. Basically, I'm sure the gist that you're getting from this is just make sure that your outfit is professional but comfortable and that it represents you. It's up to you how you want to show your personality. I know some companies are more on the neutral or conservative side with colors, but if you feel like, no, like I really want to wear a brightly patterned shirt or a tie or whatever it is, or dress, it's up to you how you want to make that call. But I would say just making sure that the cut is more on the professional side, and kind of going from there. If you ever need any support on figuring out whether or not an outfit is professional, you can always reach out to Career Services and we can help you out with that. So that brings me to the conclusion of preparing for the interview. Next recording is going to be tips and tricks for what you can do during the interview. So check back in for that.